My name is Isabel Medem, and I have beaten the often path by creating an innovative and sustainable sanitation system in urban settlements in my second home country, Peru.
Well, folks, in case you needed proof that this show was going down the crapper, today's episode is all about that most sacred of sacreds, the holiest of holies, the literal fountain from which centuries of comedy has spewed forth. That's right, it's toilet time, and this episode is airing on World Toilet Day, and that's no coincidence, folks. Contrary to what you and my inner child might be thinking, this subject really is unfortunately no laughing matter. Well, it's kind of funny, but not in the context of this episode, really. So game feces, people. Game faces. You might not realize it, but sanitation is one of the biggest, most profound issues plaguing our world today. And I've got with me today Isabel Medem, a woman who has selflessly dedicated her life to making sanitation access freely available to communities in the world that don't have access to plumbing or even running water. Normally, I call this segment, Why Should You Give a Shit? But that feels a little too on the nose today. So let's just say, why should you give a darn about toilets? Why should you give a darn? As always, here's a litany of facts and figures that are worth paying attention to. The UN designated November 19th as World Toilet Day, saying, who cares about toilets? 3.6 billion people do, because they don't have one that works properly. 3.6 billion, otherwise known as the amount of money Jeff Bezos earns in a day, I can only assume, or just under half of the world's population, either or. The CDC says that about 13% of the world's population lives without any form of sanitation and practice open defecation. And this problem isn't easily solved. According to the WHO, quoting Dr. Maria Neira, if countries fail to step up efforts on sanitation, safe water, and hygiene, we will continue to live with diseases that should have been long ago consigned to the history books. Diseases like diarrhea, cholera, typhoid, hepatitis A, and neglected tropical diseases including trachoma, intestinal worms, and schistosomiasis. Investing in water, sanitation, and hygiene is cost-effective and good for society in so many ways. It's an essential foundation for good health. But that's the trouble with taboos, isn't it? When we don't talk about something openly, we ignore it. We don't mention toilets in polite conversation because it's simply not done, darling. And yet there's a case for this being one of the most vitally important issues of our time. You might be aware of the deadly consequences of not having proper sanitation and the diseases that run rampant. You might have also even seen footage of communities where defecation on the street or beach is normal, and it's truly horrifying to watch, isn't it? But there are other issues you might not have thought of, such as the lack of safety for women who must not only worry about assault when going in public, but there are long-term consequences of primarily women having to walk miles a day to get water. An article by Katie Dahlstrom and Helen Medina for the United Nations Foundation says that when you improve access to sanitation, literacy rates rise. And when schools build proper toilet facilities, girls spend more time in school and less time at home. And elaborating on that point above, and not to take things in too dark of a direction here, but recent evidence shows that the implications of poor sanitation can extend beyond diseases. It can put women at a high risk for non-partner sexual violence, or NPSV. Studies in Odisha have found that women feared unwanted sexual encounters, such as being watched, indecent exposure, and NPSV when they go out in the open to meet their sanitation needs in the absence of toilets. This was from a piece by Apurva Jadhav, Abigail Weitzman, and Emily Smith Greenaway. And we spend a lot of time on these toilets in modern society, and we're lucky to have them, right? Because when else would we endlessly browse Reddit, scrolling, searching for that one piece of content that finally gives us the inner peace we've been craving for so long? But as you might have guessed, installing full-blown plumbing and water lines simply isn't possible in large parts of the world. So we need alternative, cost-effective solutions for these areas. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says toilets play a crucial role in creating a strong economy. A lack of toilets at work and at home has severe consequences, including poor health leading to absenteeism, reduced concentration, exhaustion, and decreased productivity. And for you scrofulous money grubbers out there, every dollar invested in water and sanitation leads to $4 back in economic returns. To be clear, this issue doesn't just plague so-called developing nations. Even in the United States, around 1.1 million people have insecure water access. And that is sourced from medicalnewstoday.com. But who's willing, I ask, to dedicate themselves to this commode conundrum, this porta-potty puzzler? Well, my guest today is Isabel Medem, creator of Sanima, an organization that offers a safe and sustainable sanitation service for households in human settlements, otherwise known as places where people live. Her work has already alleviated hundreds of tons of human waste, and I have deep admiration for her commitment to this highly noble pursuit. So in honor of World Toilet Day, let's hear right now from someone much smarter than me. Welcome to the show. Great introduction. I'm intrigued already. We know that sanitation is not important, not a big deal. So what's the fuss about?
Yeah, what's the fuss about? That's what I thought when I first met my co-founder 10 years ago in Berlin. And she started opening my eyes to this huge problematic in the world that is usually described as sort of, a third of the world population does not have access to a toilet in their home.
Third.
And that, of course, then when you start thinking about it like that, you're like, oh, wait a second, I just used the toilet, or it's everywhere. What does it mean that billions of people don't have that? And then, of course, you immediately realize that is effectively unacceptable, because it means that you have to use alternatives, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't have a choice. You have to go to the toilet. So you use alternatives. And those are, depending on if you're living in rural areas or in urban areas, especially in urban areas, very, very risky for your health, for your safety as women, and in general, just a burden for your well-being. And what I personally found so impactful or depressing about it was that I felt that is something that should be provided. It should be provided by the government to as it is in all countries. It's provided. You don't make it. It's not a decision that you make when you move into an apartment. You don't say, "Oh, I'd like an apartment with a toilet."
With a toilet, please. There. Right, exactly.
Yeah, and so it's
one isn't enough for Westerners. We need 2 or 3.
Yeah. And so it's for me, it's infuriating, right? It's like, how come this is not something that is on top, on the the highest priority and on the agenda for governments? For my co-founder, what was particularly her sort of interest lay more in the
either or both
whole treatment. Yeah, was more in the treatment aspect of it, which is also true. Which is we flush liters of water, perfectly clean water down the drain, that then has to be cleaned again, etc. So it's a whole environmental aspect that is not sustainable as well. Yeah, I can go on talking about that forever, and I've ruined many a dinner conversation through that already.
Right. Why is it that people don't like hearing about these kinds of things? What is it about you? That's the mission that we're all on, but who cares? We're not here for those people. We're here for the people who care. We're here for the people who are open to these types of topics. That's what we're doing. Where do we begin on your journey? Where did it start?
Well, it's a difficult question. There are several answers to that. I guess on just sort of me perspective, it started simply with the fact that I am half Peruvian. My mother is Peruvian. My father is German. If you just go by passports.
Yes.
So I grew up going to Peru a lot and sort of I grew up sort of mostly in Vienna, Austria, but we went to Peru a lot. And so I got early on a lot of contact with the country, with the language, with the food, and with the type of lives that people live there, both in super, super high society, very sort of wealthy surroundings, as well as the ones that impacted me more, the not so well-off people.
Right.
You would say those living in poverty, and sort of the unfairness about that. And then that always stuck with me, and I always felt sort of like when I was in Europe, I was like, wait, but as Europeans, we're also very much connected historically with South American, with other parts of the world, and colonialism and all of those things. And so I was always like, wait, what happened? What is going on here? And so that's sort of that. I always wanted to understand, or I was always very sort of disturbed by injustice or unfairness. How I got into sanitation was by accident. As I said, I met my co-founder or the founder of the organizations, who became my business partner, when I was living in Berlin briefly, and she was very interested in the topic of sanitation. I wasn't really because I find it such a complex infrastructure engineering topic usually. But I found really interesting this idea of saying, okay, well, let's think of a way of looking at this problem by focusing on the problem and by listening to those affected by it. And the way to do that for me at that time was by designing sort of a system or a product in this sort of entrepreneurial manner, if you will.
Yes.
Today I think about that differently, but back then that was very much my thinking.
And how quickly in the process did you realize that it had to be a waterless solution?
And so that was from the beginning.
Okay.
That was from the beginning because if you do a water toilet, you need the infrastructure, you need piping, you need construction, you need investments, and you need a whole system, and you need a treatment facility for that. So that's just not, also from a sustainable sort of environmental aspect, that doesn't make sense. But it was mainly also because we were like, well, we want something that works for households now. We want something that they just have to say, oh yes, please, I want this. I'll sign a contract. And so for that, we needed it to be sort of independent of infrastructure, of any form of installation or something. So yeah, that was the decision. And we first designed our own toilet, which was also one of the first steps in Peru. We spent a couple of months or weeks designing with a Peruvian team. We built a Peruvian team very quickly. Very interesting prototypes came out, few of which actually lasted. Yeah. But we worked with our own prototype for a while. We produced it in Peru, and then we now have a partnership with a great Swedish dry toilet manufacturer who has been a great partner in providing these toilet models for us, and in that way also took a burden away from us because we didn't have to think about design, production, testing, all of those things, which is a huge headache.
And now it's time for a segment we like to call Ask the Streets.
Do you know about World Toilet Day on November 19th?
I am unaware of World Toilet Day.
Okay, well it is. It's not a joke. What do you think it means? Why do you think there is a World Toilet Day?
Well, I would say there's a World Toilet Day because toilets are really important.
Okay, why are they so important?
Because they shuttle away all sorts of disgusting waste that would otherwise make our lives very difficult.
Yes. And if you had to take a guess, how many people do you think in the world don't have access to a proper toilet or sanitation facility?
I would say 1 in 10.
1 in 10?
1 in 10. Just under 1 billion people.
Just under 1 billion people? It's actually 3.6 billion people, just under 40% of the world population.
Wow, that's shocking.
That's shocking, yeah. What do you think we should do about it?
Oh, way too big of a question for a guy like me.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Then let's get back to the show and figure it out.
I've seen in documentaries, like, if you're probably familiar with Inside Bill's Brain, the Netflix documentary about Bill Gates, he's been trying to solve this problem as well. You can see just how massive this problem becomes so quickly. And it was interesting for me to note that they came up with a waterless system. I think in his method, they tried to reclaim drinking water from it, but maybe others just burn the waste. What was the solution for you that you came up with?
So the solution that we came up with was to to focus on getting the waste out of people's homes. So what we said was, okay, so we're going to try to find the best quality, best looking, and most practical toilet that can be put in a person's home without that home or that person having to do much for that. And so this is how we came up with this sort of mobile toilet. So first we designed it. It was our own product, which is a toilet that you can just put like a chair. You put it somewhere. And now we use separate, but the brand, the Swedish brand. But the idea was still the same. You put it in there and it works as a toilet perfectly without water. Of course, this is sort of the second option that to what would be perfect, right? With current standards, which is a flush toilet and whatever. But in my opinion, the second best would be that. So the toilets and the experience of going to a toilet and not having to use a pit latrine anymore, not being scared. Children are very scared of falling into pit latrines.
Rightfully
women,
so, I can imagine. I mean,
yeah. And for women or people who menstruate, it is completely a hassle to use a pit latrine in those moments. You're very prone to infectious diseases. Pregnant women. So it's a whole sort of also this shame of sort of not having a proper toilet in your home. So to just sort of have we hope to take care of that part with the toilet. But what for us was the most important thing was like, but if that's only one part of the problem, because the toilet fills up, and we need to take that burden off of people's minds as well. And so that's why we focused on designing a service, on designing a way in which we can every week reliably and respectfully pick up and take away the accumulated feces so that the users no longer have to worry about that. And so we developed that system. We developed a system through which for a while we used a truck. Now we use tuk-tuk cars. We have a jingle, and we go by very, very early in the morning before people
like an
go
ice
to
cream
work.
truck. There's a certain sound
like
that people
truck.
recognize.
We have a jingle. And we go past, we have different routes. Every day is a different route for a couple of hours, and our team goes by and picks up and collects the waste. And then our ideal was to turn it into compost, right? There are a couple of other organizations similar to ours in other parts of the world who do very interesting sort of waste to resource stuff. We're still trying to figure that part out as well. That would be great, right? To turn it into coal or into compost. We tried compost for a while, but for now we just take it away.
Okay.
And so so this means that we focused really on trying to provide something that is relevant for households right now. I just want to say something small about sort of this whole household and slum thing, or sort of informal settlements. I'm not sure how it is in other parts of the world, but I know that in Lima, the way that these informal settlements generally have come to existence is usually seen as sort of like this illegal, informal sort of thing. Suddenly people appear and they're there, and now they're claiming all of these services, and why they came here sort of without doing it the proper way.
Right.
And that's actually not true. What is true is that there are a lot of people in Lima, or either they come to Lima for historical reasons, or they are already in Lima and they are in need of their own home. The city does not invest in housing for their citizens. And since they're like, I have literally nowhere to go, I can't stay at in my uncle's room for the rest of my life. I'm having my own family or whatever it is that you're doing. And so they take advantage of a law, or they use a law that allowed people to claim rights to unused government land if they stay on it for, I think the window was 24 hours. It keeps changing. But my point is that what they say is, okay, so we'll get together and with other people that we don't really know, but we know that we have to be a group. We'll go squat on this government-owned land, and then we will enter a legal process through which we can start building ourselves a district of the city, and through which then we can start claiming municipal services. And so actually what they've been doing is that they've had to take into their own hands their own
everything.
everything. And so this lack of, when you say they don't have access to sanitations, it's actually like the government isn't providing it to them. It is not being thought of. It is not being developed for all of these parts of the city.
It's just land.
And so I think I'm saying this because I think it's important to situate what we do within that context.
Yes.
We don't arrive there and people are like, oh my God, I never thought of a toilet. Thank you so much. They're very much, it's an ongoing thing, right? So we're there. We're like, look, this might work for you now. You can always choose to use it or not because we charge for it. So it's not, I hope it helps for now, but we are aware that you're, aiming for something larger, and we're with you on that.
What was the pilot program? How did you start with that first test case?
It was a very, very small area situated on a very strange place. It was situated right outside of a water and sanitation treatment plant, funnily enough.
Ironically enough. Great.
Ironically enough.
Ouch.
Yeah. And we presented our idea, but must have been really strange the way that we looked and the way that we just sort of started talking about toilets and ideas. We didn't have a prototype yet. So that's how we then started, and it wasn't really like we were received with open arms. And then we went to knock on people's doors and asked whether they would be willing to participate in a very short test of toilets and whatever. And some of them said yes. And then we designed, or my business partner and her team designed some toilet prototypes, and that was a pilot. Like we put them in there, let them stay over the weekend, and then we would ask them to tell us, what went wrong, what didn't work, what blah, blah, blah. And then very quickly, we also started to offer the pickup system because, as I said, from the beginning, we knew that had to work. The toilet was probably going to work, but we needed the service to work. And we needed to know whether people were willing to hand us, a bucket, and whether they were willing to pay a little bit for it.
And when you're taking away these buckets, where are you taking them to?
We rented a piece of land and sort of on that, did some composting tests. We worked with one of the universities of Lima to sort of design the best process to make compost out of it. That was quite interesting. And that's what we did for a long time. Until a few years ago, we decided we needed to put a break on that. So we're now taking it to registered official landfill with a official waste collection company until we find a final way to turn it into a resource.
I do want to give you the last word. So where can people support what you're doing or find out more about what you're doing? So the floor is yours to wrap this up.
Well, so I would say for those looking to support us or to help us out, I think the best way is visit our website. We try to have there's currently an impact report up there. You can find information, and then obviously the best would really be donations. We're very, we work with large foundations, international organizations, but every financial support that we can get that comes in a way that we can be grateful and at the same time is not attached to sort of reporting and all of those things is really great, because we can translate that into often, discounts for families or special packages or special agreements for special toilet installations. Like in kindergartens and things like that. So it can always we can do, or even sometimes a bonus for team members or things like that. So that's really, really, really helpful. I know it's difficult and not sort of the most fun thing to do nowadays to simply donate, but that would be really helpful. And then the other thing I think would be more like a message to fellow social entrepreneurs, and it would be to reflect a little bit on what it is that we do and what it is that we do when we speak about things, about problems, about people. Who do we speak to? And why? Why are we speaking? Why are not other people the ones that are speaking for themselves, And to just, reflect a little bit on that and think about what this whole idea of sort of, we go to other parts of the world to help them develop something to critically think about. And it doesn't mean that we have to eradicate social entrepreneurship. It means to make it better. But for us to make it better, we have to allow ourselves among us to become critical about it and to talk to each other about that.
Great.
And I'm happy to be reached out to for those conversations. So please do.
And of course, Isabel Medem, thank you so much again. And with that, the official podcast is over. That was an interesting episode. I don't know how I feel about it. On the one hand, I'm very happy that somebody like Isabel is out there in the world working so hard. On the other hand, I'm frustrated at the political nature of this and that it's a problem that isn't being taken more seriously. If you like this show, if you like this story, if you believe in this mission, either reach out to her, reach out to sanima.pe, or again, it's a special day, so make a donation. Make a donation to any of the approved UN charities for World Toilet Day, or make a donation directly to her foundation. That would be the best thing that you can possibly do. Failing that, share this story with somebody who maybe takes their own sanitation for granted, or somebody else who might actually want to be a part of this mission. So thank you very much for listening to the Be the Often Path podcast. You know I appreciate you as always, and I will see you next Friday.